Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel for another Vital tutorial. In this video I'm going to talk about 808s as someone had asked in a comment a few videos ago. So just telling you, if you want me to discuss something in particular, just write to me in the comments and I'll see what I can do. This in particular just took me a couple of weeks of thinking, and that's why you haven't been seeing a video from my channel for quite a bit. Because I really wanted to, get on the topic and, getting a little bit of a structured idea of what to talk about, because the field, even though it's kind of simple and apparently small, can be quite vast and offer quite a bunch of possibilities. I'll cover as much ground as I can, but I have no way of being exhaustive on the topic. There's really a lot of stuff to see, a lot of possibilities on how to do this. So let's get into it and see what's what. So here we have Vital, our usual initialized preset, and before starting to program it, we might ask ourselves a question. What is an 808? Well, by an 808 in the current musical language, we typically refer to a kick, a tuned kick, which is somehow reminiscent of the kick coming from the TR-808, the very famous and originally not very successful drum machine from Roland, which has achieved a cult status and has been replicated in countless pieces of hardware and software and sampled to death in every conceivable pack of whatever, and has found its way in too many tracks to count. Now, one of the characteristics which made it not very interesting for a lot of musicians looking for something realistic, something that sounded like a real kick, was the fact that the kick had a very distinctive tone and a very strong fundamental. So, and that's what people actually now want in a timbre like that. So how do I do it? Well, let's start from the very basic and do something I hope everyone has seen at least once. So I'm just going to get a sine wave and I'm going to add some pitch modulation on it with an envelope. And I'm going to get my laser thing here, and then I'm going to make it short enough. Let's get the attack to 0 and even this attack to 0. Let's put this phase randomization to 0 so that we have consistent attacks, and then we get back to envelope 2 and make it short enough so that our pitch drop actually works like giving us this percussive transient. This is it basically. This is the way you would get on an original 808, or most 808 emulations would work. Get deciding how much of this you want, where you want your fundamental. In this case, of course, I'm controlling it with a keyboard, so I can put it wherever I want to put my finger. And this could be it as far as the basic generation, if we consider the idea of saying, hey, I have an 808, and then, we would just move to the effects and, I don't know, distort and compress it and process it and EQ it and whatever. Not necessarily. Now, there would be a lot of people, and I wouldn't say they would be wrong, because it's just one way of doing it, who would try to make a timbre like this in layers, trying to make a low end, which might maybe come up later, and synthesize the tail and the click of the attack separately. It is one way of doing it, and it can be very effective, and it can allow you to control somehow them in a more precise way. But it also has its drawbacks, and this is why I mostly like to make 808s or kicks like this using a single sound source. In this case, I'm just gonna use one oscillator, and I will mostly keep it to be a sine wave. But what can I do? Now, say for example, I could make use of the wonderful FM capabilities of Vital and get here one, let's say, using LFO1 and make it key tracked, and use it to modulate the phase of oscillator 1. Now it will sound terrible, as you would expect. Let's make it bipolar. And then I'm going to go here in this oscillator 1 phase. Now I actually will like it unipolar for reasons which would take a bit to explain. And then I'm just going to change the shape of this. You suppose you've seen me doing this in my videos about FM. See, now there's this big subharmonic thing going on, and then I'm gonna get, let's say, I'll get envelope 2 here to be linear, and then I'm gonna work on both on this here. I'm gonna modulate this amount with this envelope, and I'm gonna change the shape of it. So while this thing too, see, you can decide this big amount of subharmonic sideband. You can decide how much of this you want, and you can do it again. I say again, LFO1, still modulating oscillator 1 phase, but this time I'm gonna give it a different shape, maybe getting more harmonics. I say 3 signs or 5 signs, 3 signs, so it will be 1/5 above our fundamental, and then again get this envelope to control it. Again, yes, here it is. And you see, you're giving it a different character. And here I'm using 3 signs. I could use different. I mean, this is just to decide where I want to put it. I can get it very bright, pointlessly bright, very far from being a kick at a point. But I suppose you get the logic. Here I'm just getting some slightly brighter. And maybe I could do this once more again to add, say, I really want, something very, very much brighter to happen in the beginning at the top of my timbre, so that I make it a little more complex. And let's say I'm going to go for this 9 signs, which is a lot. And then again, use envelope 2 to control it. No, not this one. Yes, and then. But this, maybe I want very. See, this is really. It's almost doing, the job of being noise. Now, if you change the starting phase of this, things will be very different, because of course you will get. It will get the click, the early click at the beginning of our sound more prominent or less prominent, really depends on where you put it. Then we could have done it earlier, but we're doing it now. You could actually think of your, amplitude modulation too, so your amplitude envelope. But even your tail somehow ends in an orderly way. Maybe you don't want only one single fundamental. Maybe you want something more. And so, for example, you might want to add a couple of harmonics here, just low, not so pronounced, and maybe add another one here, so that the point will be that I'm gonna get those in the ending, but I'm gonna get this envelope to control. So that what happens is I have my wavetable moving from that position to this position. Actually, it's not moving at all because they're identical. I need to remove so that I have a little bit more of harmonic content in my tail. See the point of what I'm trying to do. In the beginning, I want it to be only a sine wave, and then it will become something else, just because I'm making sure to keep the noise coming from elsewhere. But, I could remove this, and you see, it just gets a little bit too noisy, at least for my taste. Or I could actually keep it like that and having this thing, and then go and control this too, with this envelope, because I might want to, make it happen quicker, or making the higher harmonics appear later on in my. It's really, really up to you. Now, one thing, actually, there's a little too many harmonic. I like it more like this. Now, this is, for keeping it at the simplest level. I could make it a lot more complex. I could start with a more complicated wave and then control it with a filter. I could use the low pass here to make it happen. The low pass in my spectral effects. I could do, there's lots of ways to get to something like this. I mean, it's really, that's the reason why I made that. I took so long, because I wanted to make something general on the topic, and I can't, because there's so many things you can do. Another thing you might do, still keeping on the single source thing, is adding more FM by the noise. This adds a bunch of other possibilities, and like in this case will sound terrible. See, make it sound like a snare or something akin to a snare, but this is just because this is white noise. If I get some other types of noise, or if you got myself something which sounded in one way or another right for our purpose, you could do great things about it. Now you see this thing too. It's been added to our envelope. I could make it quicker. So you get this beating noise at the beginning, and the character type of noise you choose will give it definitely different character. The amount of this will give it a different character. Everything will work in this way. So again, in the matrix, it's really up to you to decide how you want it. I mean, I'm not crazy for this thing. At least I didn't make it. Not for this kick I was doing. I didn't like it. But in general, it can be a good idea. And you can also, let me get it back to working. You can also consider the idea that this has a pitch. Even the noise, this is actually just a sampler. So the way you can pitch your noise and decide where you want it to be. This is just doing it a bit, yeah, right, but I want it quicker. Now I like it much more. Get this little bit of a noise rumble at the bottom of it. It's kind of nice. And it's still perfectly tuned. Maybe it's too short. I really like this thing to be a little longer, and maybe I could want this to be. But then I'm gonna because I really want that to be generally longer, but I want it to be. I'm gonna change all these for making them. Yes, there is this I wanted to do because I wanted this to have two. Because my point was actually having this have a longer tail, so that you could have this thing happening longer, and I could have a longer tail in my kick, which is, I don't know, I kind of want that. That's what I wanted to do. Now I think we're done with making my basic sound. It's just an idea. You can make it the way you want. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. But then it could be the time to work for some processing. Now, distortion, of course. There's lots of possible distortions. I mean, if you go, I really like on kicks this signfold. It gets a little bit too much highs, but it does. I don't know. It does really give a different timbre. I really like this soft clip, which does great. If you go for something harder, you might get a bunch of things which might not be, what you're looking for. A bunch of interesting artifacts, but you can filter them out. And use a filter to give, your timbre more character. You can also happen to want to move the since you're doing something. I have 8 voices, but I could go for 1. You can also think of moving moving this with an envelope and making sure this thing stays somewhere that makes thing for you. It's really, the settings of a distortion in this case can be critical. The amount of things that can be critical on a sound like this is, everything can be critical. What are the main sound shaping parameters? I mean, I've seen people making kicks in the most diverse ways. Lots of people would start from samples. Some others would do like I'm doing. I cannot really cover how do you make that sound. Oh, well, it's going to take a while. And then we come to compression. Now, I'm not a great fan of this compressor. Maybe it's my fault. I mean, I've seen a lot of people saying, hey, it's great, I love Vital Compressor. I don't. But in this case, especially, I wouldn't want... I don't know. It does make everything louder, but the thing I find is it also makes everything uglier, and I'd rather not. So let's say we get some compression. Not so much compression, but a longer attack. That does never seem to be enough. So that we have we let the attack pass. And then, this thing, it just got it here. Now we see we are compressing before distorting, and I actually would do the opposite. Because, we have this thing already making the sound quite a bit flatter. And so in this case, we just let some of the attack. We let our sound get some of the attack, the distortion is taken way back. It is something already. We have a timbre. Then, well, I haven't used a filter. I might want to use a filter in the way I used it earlier and, just make it, static somehow. Give it to, let's say I'm moving it by 5 octaves or 4 octaves, but I'm gonna make it stay on, let's say 12, around 1 octave above. And also I can make use of this distortion, or changing the character of my filter will make it this ladder with this resonance is and with this and everything else, it's a little bit too much. I mean, I'm not really happy with that, but maybe. Shaping an envelope changes everything. See, this is going to filter 1, which is pretty okay. Everything's fine. But, I could go for an EQ or something like that. Another thing I could do if I really think, hey, there's something in this timbre I don't like, I want to remove specifically somewhere, I could here, staying on this type of filter, saying that yes, I want this to be analog, but I want it to be like a notch blend or notch spread, so that I have a notch filter in a specific frequency. Now, if I put it here, it's really cutting the very fundamental, which doesn't make too much sense. But saying where you want it, can really give your timbre some more character, and it's gonna be different. Because what I'm trying to avoid doing, which is the same thing here somehow, is using an EQ, because that would be totally static, and then you would get that your timbre would have a different harmonic behavior according to the note you're playing. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, but it really doesn't really make a lot of a difference. So now we have something which is quite noisy. I'm not really too proud of this. I had made a nicer one earlier, but as usual. But at the same time, I got to tell you, for doing this, I made lots of kicks, some of which are quite nice, and I'm going to put them on my Gumroad. So not really immediately, but this is going to be a pack of kicks. made by me on my Gumroad, and you might go and check them out, check them or other of my other sounds I made for Vital and for other synths pretty soon. There's going to be a link in the description. So I think I've said, I wouldn't say I said everything I wanted to say, because everything I wanted to say would make this video eternal. I mean, and I'm already at something around 20 minutes, which I suppose is more than enough for someone to digest. I probably shall mention the fact that, here I'm using an envelope and I'm using the different possibilities, mapping possibilities to have one envelope, I mean, this interval, this single decay behave differently from one modulation to the other. Another thing a bunch of people have seen doing, and that makes perfect sense, is instead of using an envelope, using an LFO in envelope mode, and then, like, say, putting here a breakpoint. Let's put it in seconds. Let's make it completely unsmooth. And like, for example, instead of using here an envelope 1 to control the transpose, here using LFO2. Now, LFO2 at this point, you see, let me get it back to being linear, factory linear, so up. So that here, you see, you have this thing modulating my pitch. What is the positive thing in this? You know that I can decide that I have a certain sharp pitch drop in the beginning, and then I have a smoother, longer decay for the rest of the time. Now it's just in seconds, so it's like half a second. I'm gonna make it a little longer. See, for example, this, I might see, but this here, it's, they say, one semitone above. I'm gonna go for two. Not one semitone, I mean, it's one bar, which is 1/12, 2/12 of this. So see, this thing is being modulated by how much modulation is happening. 36, let's go to 48. Well, yeah, 48.5. So you see, we have this thing from here to here. There's gonna be like 8 semitones of pitch drift, which are gonna happen slower. And you get this more realistic sensation of a pitch which is slowly dropping over time, instead of just that quick drop and one single curve, which, it could be a little less realistic. And then, you can control that and this decay separately, like, like if they were two different things. And now I have this other envelope too, which is doing a bunch of things, which I will not remap everything to this or to similarly shaped envelopes, but you could, and make your own. Every single parameter have its own evolution, and the way of, you can do it with one single LFO instead of doing it with this, doing it with the mod remapping. It just would take a little longer and a lot more to explain. And I'm quite sure those people who would do it don't need me to explain it step by step in a video. So thanks for the attention and for staying with me this long. If you stayed with me this long and you still haven't subscribed, do. There's a button here, and you clearly like to hear me talk and you like the stuff I'm talking about. I remind you again, there's a link to my Gumroad always in the description, where you can find a bunch of patches for these videos, for Vital, for making your own tracks. And then there's some links to other things, such as Deeptanzproductions I'm working with, and a bunch of my music you might be interested in. If you want to listen to my music, to what do I do with my amazing sound design skills, well, just check the links in the description. Thank you, and bye. See you at next video.